So I am Carla from HomeGauge, and I am the Director of Communications and Web Services, and just kind of help sometimes with presentations and webinars and stuff like that. Um, so today we are here to talk about E&O and the partnership that HomeGauge has with the lead MGA. And today we have Victor, who is Victor on here?
Nope, picture's not on.
Victor's not on yet, so he might be also having some technical difficulties or perhaps traffic or something. So I'm going to move along and introduce Joe Denneler, who is the General Counsel and Chief Claims Officer for Elite. He personally oversees the claims team and reviews every home inspector claim submitted to Elite. With 20 years of litigation experience, Joe specializes in home inspector claims and is a frequent lecturer on claim prevention and management for home inspectors. Joe, did you want to add anything to my brief introduction about your career and history in person?
I'm sorry, I managed to mute myself somehow. No, that was an excellent recitation, and you only hit the high points, which is always good.
I made sure to
But
leave out
no,
the points.
yeah, no, I've been a lawyer for 25 years, and for most of that time, I represented home inspectors in litigation in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Delaware. And that's kind of how I got my start, as I started working for other insurance programs out there and started handling their cases in the courts. And eventually, after 20 years, I decided I'd rather be, kind of look over things from a more global standpoint than be the boots on the ground for these programs. And that's when I joined Elite, and we built our captive insurance carrier so that we actually, can manage this program and have full control over it.
Awesome. So thank you, Joe. Joe basically knows everything legal, and just file that away in your back pocket. Uh, and the next presenter that we have here is Kathleen Kuhn, who I'm sure that everyone knows because she is famous and a legend in the home inspection industry. Kathleen's the former CEO of Housemaster Home Inspection and brings over 30 years of industry expertise. She is well known for her strategic vision, deep industry knowledge, and advocacy for best practices. Kathleen today is going to share valuable insights on risk management and home inspection standards. And combined, everyone is going to tell you everything that you could possibly ever want to know. And if they don't cover it, you can feel free to ask questions and they will answer them. So, Kathleen, if you'd like to talk more about yourself and then carry on with the presentation, then I will go ahead and turn this over to you.
Well, I appreciate that, Carla, and I appreciate everybody being on. So, yes, I've been in the home inspection industry for a very long time. My husband is still a home inspector. My son is in the home inspection business, and a very big part of what we did in our network, and Housemaster was a national company that was started by my father, with offices, 325 offices throughout the U.S. and Canada. And early on, we actually began franchising in 1979. And early on, before there was legislation, we felt it was very important for our offices and our inspectors to have professional liability insurance. So I've been involved in the protection, if you will, and risk management of home inspectors for a very, very long time. I'm very passionate about it, particularly because inspectors spend so much time learning about what they do and they become very, very proficient at it. But but insurance is a whole nother language, and it's very nuanced, and it's very easy for an inspector to not necessarily have the proper coverage, which of course they often don't find out about until there is a problem. So I'm very happy to talk today about a number of key issues. And I've got Joe here to kind of fill in the gaps and add additional information, but we're really going to cover some key areas. Number one, key factors that impact your premium. So every home inspection business is rated, if you will, and there's some key factors that actually help a carrier, us, decide your premium. So what you have control over, what you don't have control over, we're going to go into that. we're going to cover some of those key insurance terms that every home inspector should know. And again, what's important about these terms is that they impact your coverage significantly. So you don't want to find out that you didn't understand a term or you didn't ask a question only to find out you don't have that coverage. We're also going to talk about some risk management through Elite MGA. So Elite MGA has been in the business of protecting home inspectors for a long time. They're one of the best in the business. I met them at a session, and again, having put on hundreds of presentations on risk management, was very impressed. When I got to know them a little bit more, I said, I'd really like to be a part of this. It kind of meets my need of helping protect inspectors and doing it with a best-in-class solution. We're going to talk about the HomeGauge and Elite program. It's really a powerful program because it not only offers that stellar protection, but it does so at very competitive, often reduced rates. And then we'll open it up to Q&A. All right, some key factors that impact your premium. Number one, it's your claims history. So certainly a history of frequent claims is going to be considered as part of your premium. But some things you need to understand is that when you file a claim or when you report a claim, most insurance companies will assign a reserve. And I'm not going to go into this is, kind of high level, but it means that they're going to assume this is how much money it's going to cost to settle or defend that claim. And that money, even though it may not be spent, is considered as part of your claims history and is considered as part of your next year's premiums. If everybody could mute, because I'm having some background noise here. So
I was just going to say that I unmuted myself. If you are not muted, if you could mute, because there's a little bit of background noise interference. And thank you.
So, and then if you've been in business for a while, or well, more than a year, more than you've had one policy, you're going to need to get your loss runs, and that's really your claims history too. And that means, what is the insurance company you've reported to the insurance company and what they're really holding in reserve. So, again, your claims activity is very important, not only the ones that the insurance companies pay out on, but also the ones that they're actually reserving money for because you've reported and put them at notice. So one of the key benefits of the Elite MGA HomeGauge program is that they allow for something called no fault reporting. That means when you have a customer complaint, you can report it to the insurance company, put them on notice, but if you believe it's something that's going to go away, you believe it's something you're going to resolve, it's not going to escalate into a full claim, it will never go on your loss runs, it will never go in your reserves. So that's a good way to protect your, it doesn't, so if you've got again, you've got a complaint from a customer, you can report it to Elite. It won't go they won't create a reserve. It won't go on your loss runs. Now, that's super important because if you don't do that, and often many inspectors say, listen, I've got this customer complaint. It's not a big deal. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm going to handle it. I don't want to report it to the insurance company. I don't want to put them on notice because if I do, it's going to become a reserve and it could impact my future premiums. So unfortunately, if that happens and that client or that complaint does escalate and becomes a claim, you won't be covered because you didn't put the insurance company on notice. So
it's hugely, I was just going to say it's hugely important. And the reason we did this, it originates with me having to take those calls from home inspectors who would say, Joe, I need to retain you, but I don't have insurance for this claim. I didn't want to put my carrier on notice because they're going to raise my premium, or, I don't like the lawyers they hire. And so I thought it would go away. And then when they did sue me and I reported it to my carrier, they said I'm not covered because I didn't report it during the policy period when I first got notice of that claim. And that was always the worst call in the world for me to take as a lawyer. When you work in a community of people like inspectors, you get to know people. And, the last thing I wanted to see people have to do is shell out tens of thousands of dollars of their money to defend themselves on a claim because they were afraid to report it. And so we came up with the no fault reporting system because we feel like you're paying us partially to help you get rid of these things. And we don't want to penalize you for using that service. And so if it's something we can get rid of by writing a letter on your behalf, or if it's something for whatever reason you decide you want to settle it, but it's an amount within your deductible, and there's no check being written by us, we will facilitate that whole process, handle it from soup to nuts, get you a signed release and get you out of it. And it will never show up as a claim on your loss run. And that's our promise to our insureds. We want you to report everything. We're not here to penalize you. We're here to help you. And that's kind of the genesis of where that came from.
Love that. Some other factors that impact your premium: where you're located. For example, in the lovely Garden State, New Jersey, it is a high litigation state, so premiums are generally higher in the state of New Jersey. So your state definitely could impact high or low your premium. Litigation trends, again, New Jersey, example of frequent litigation. There's also some economic factors, so you don't have much control over that, but that is something that will impact the premium. That is something that is a factor that is considered. The other factor that's considered, another one, is coverage limits, and a lot of inspectors don't understand that. They get a quote, one quote is really low, one quote's higher, and they think I'm just going to go the lower, but they're never really looking at coverages. So I'm going to go into the different types of coverage limits because there's occurrence and there's aggregate, there's sublimits, but usually your coverage limits are what you particularly choose. In addition to most states, if it's a licensed state, they have state requirements for insurance. So they say you need to carry a minimum of this much insurance. You may also have some corporate requirements. So if you're part of a franchise example, usually the franchisor will also have certain limits that you are required to cover. So the first thing is understanding, what limits you are required to coverage, and then, you are required by either your state requirements or other requirements, and then make sure you're getting covered for those. And then let's talk about what those coverage limits look like. Every policy has a per occurrence limit, and that means this is the maximum that the policy will pay on one particular claim during the policy period. And then there's an aggregate limit, which is how much the insurance company will pay out completely for all claims over the policy period. So if you've got a $500,000 per occurrence limit, then every claim that comes in under that policy for that year, the carrier is responsible for paying up to $500,000. If your aggregate is $2 million, then if you had 4 claims totaling $500,000, first of all, that would be a very, very unusually bad year, but then you would hit your maximum aggregate of $2 million. So per occurrence is how much an insurance carrier will pay on a per claim on one particular incident, one particular claim. Aggregate is over the entire policy period. Some policies also have sublimits. So they may say, okay, for example, we agree your policy is covering you for $500,000 per occurrence. However, if this is for example, wood destroying insect claim, then there is a sum limit of $250,000. And that just means that on those particular types of claims, there would be a little less coverage on a per occurrence basis. So not all policies have sum limits. Again, they tend to be triggered by, different factors. But the most important thing to understand is know what your limits are. Again, they're going to be dictated by your state regulations, potentially corporate considerations. Some inspectors also are going to be considering the value of the properties that they inspect. So if you're in a very high-end home, you may want to make sure that you have a higher per occurrence and higher aggregate because the homes that you inspect are more expensive. Another factor will be the services that you offer. So, in addition to your standard inspections, you may be offering radon, wood destroying insect, mold, synthetic stucco inspections, sewer inspections, buried fuel tank. There's obviously a whole list. These could impact your premium. Elite MGA actually has a very broad list of services that they cover within the base policy. So often there will not be any additional premium. These coverages are added as an endorsement, and that's, again, one of those key insurance terms. Endorsement, also called a rider. That just means that in addition to the base policy, that we're also adding coverage for radon, adding coverage for wood destroying insect, mold, etc. So, again, the services that you offer impact your premium. It's very important as you add services. So maybe mid-policy year, you decide you're going to start offering buried fuel tanks or sewer inspections. It's very important to contact your carrier and make sure that you are getting services that are, or that you're getting covered. Also, I'm going to talk about retroactive dates, and if you are getting a new policy, let's say that you used to do buried fuel tanks, you don't do them anymore. You still want that an endorsement on your future policy, because your policy will be what's called a claims-made policy, and I'll get to that in a minute.
One thing I'd add there too is, with our company, I mean, I can't speak for other carriers, I can only speak for us, but we also don't charge you to add these to your policy. So if you're 6 months into your policy and you decide you want to get, qualified to do mold sampling, and you can produce to us the qualifications, we will add that to your coverage for no charge. What we look for is to make sure that the inspectors who we do insure for these services have the right qualifications for it. That's really the factor that we review when we decide whether or not we can offer these coverages to our insureds, is do they have the certification? And obviously, for nearly every type of ancillary service you can think of tied to inspection, there's usually some training associated with it. Even with the sewer cameras, there's training videos and other things from the manufacturers that people will use, but we don't charge to do that. The other thing is, with the ancillary services, some of the other carriers won't cover you for a claim that involves mold if you don't buy that endorsement from them. And in most situations, obviously, the inspector has no liability for mold at all. So in our minds, if you get sued and they say, well, you should have found the mold in the basement and you didn't offer to provide mold services, well, to us, that's a frivolous claim against you, and we need to defend you for that claim. Unfortunately, the other carriers won't defend you for that frivolous claim, even if you didn't offer to do mold, because you didn't buy their endorsement. And so that's one of the ways we try to differentiate ourselves and, kind of take ourselves out of that mix is, we're not here to nickel and dime you for everything you're possibly trying to do to go out there and make money. We want to be your partner in this, but, we're not here to take the money off your plate.
So, which is a good segue into other factors that impact your premium, and that's experience and training. So, as Joe said, the various certifications, certainly, the basic certifications, the training, your experience, all those certifications, again, particularly in terms of basic, home inspection training, as well as those ancillary services, your licenses, and interestingly enough, HomeGauge. So one of the reasons we were able to put together a program for HomeGauge users is because HomeGauge actually does positively impact home inspector risks. So all those checks and balances that are built into the software actually helps reduce the risk of a home inspection. So those are the kind of things that we consider, is always considered as part of your premium. And also, particularly, HomeGauge is one of the reasons we're able to do those discounts. So this is just a little insurance tip. When you're shopping for insurance, we call it last look. Often you'll go out and you'll get a quote from an insurance company. Often we'll give a quote, and then you'll get another quote, and one quote comes in less, or regardless, you have multiple quotes. We always encourage you to give us the last look. And what that means is, let's share the quote that you've received. Let us review coverages and discuss potential savings. Very often, if now again, we sell on quality, not price, although we're extremely competitive. So particularly with the HomeGauge discount, so we usually can hit on price as well. But very often when we're reviewing other quotes, we're finding some kind of coverage that was missing or some kind of difference. So yes, that other quote was lower, but it's because the coverages were lower. Yes, that other quote was lower, but it's because these services were not included. And if you then look at apples to apples, we're more competitive. So it's always worth it to give us the last look. It's certainly up to your decision, but normally are we not only going to likely save you money, but we're usually going to be able to identify maybe some potentially coverages that you were potentially going to get or didn't get that we're going to protect you from. So you get greater peace of mind knowing that you're properly covered. All right, let's talk about some basic policy terms. Again, I always found that insurance kind of speaks their own language, which is why I think it's very important for inspectors to understand some of these basic policy terms. And this is a really big one, the retroactive date. Now, the retroactive date, and actually I'm going to talk a little bit about the fact that it's a claims-made policy versus a occurrence policy. It really goes hand in hand with this topic. And let me jump to the next slide, actually. In professional liability insurance for home inspections, you're covered for the inspections you've done through your policy period. So it's very important that that policy period or that the date on the policy goes back to really when you first started doing inspections. So even though the policy is a 12-month policy, it needs to cover you for those inspections that you did previously. And that's what's called the retroactive date. It should be the retroactive date on your insurance policy should be the earliest date from which your inspections have been submitted or you started. And unfortunately, very often, this is another actually area where your premium can be impacted. They get a quote. It's for a 1-year policy. They fail to recognize, the new company fails to ask them the question, and the retroactive date starts from, May 1st, 2024, covers them until May 1st, 2025. Unfortunately, all inspections prior to May 1st, 2024 would not be covered. The retroactive date should not be May 1st, 2024. The retroactive date should be when you started in the business. So it's really, really important that you get that date accurate. And again, if you're filling out an application online, you're not speaking to somebody, you don't have really that personal relationship when you're filling out your policy, or you just don't know, or the application itself is unclear, you could really be caught. And when you have a gap in insurance, which is what it's called, it's very difficult to ever get insurance again for those inspections you did previously. So again, retroactive date is very, very important. It can impact your premium, but you've got to get that right. I talked a little bit about reserves, or I don't know, Joe, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Oh, no, I think that was directly on point. I mean, to give a real world experience to that, I've had 3 of our insureds now who they decided they needed to shop. The economy isn't doing them any favors this year. I would say that's affecting most people. And they decided to shop. They never talked to us, and they found the policy and thought they were getting a good deal and they were going to save about $500. And as it turned out, none of those policies had the retroactive date covering the inspections back to when the inspectors start. The retroactive date was the first date that the policy was enforced, which was, that same day. And so what those inspectors gave up unknowing is coverage for those hundreds or maybe thousands of inspections that they've done. And unfortunately, in this business, there's states out there where somebody has up to 6 years to sue you on an inspection you did. It varies from state to state. That's kind of what that's our wheelhouse is knowing what's going on in every state and dealing with that state's issues, in a vacuum. And what happens is we have inspectors out there, this inspector's out there and there, they've got 6 years of inspections that they may not have coverage for, and that claim may not come in until now. And so they basically gave up a lot more than what they got. And we never want anybody to have to make a decision that's going to put themselves in jeopardy over some money. That's just not, it's not good business for us, and it's not good business for you.
So thanks, Joe. I talked a little bit about this already. Reserves or loss runs. You should really understand those terms. Again, reserves are the money that an insurer sets aside for reported or noticed claims. It can impact your premiums for years. Non-reporting, as I spoke about earlier, really increases your risk, because if you don't report it because you think it's going to go away and it doesn't, you're not going to have coverage, which is, again, one of the many advantages of Elite, because they do have that no-fault reporting, which significantly reduces your risk, provides assistance when you have that customer complaint, and minimizes, if not eliminates, the premium impact. So this goes hand in hand with the retroactive date, claims made versus occurrence. And again, very important to understand. Claims made insurance means that you've got coverage from that policy when you're in that policy. So, once that policy is over, your coverage is over, which is why from your future policy, you have to make sure that it covers the inspections that were covered under the previous policy. So if for an occurrence-made policy, you buy the coverage, you're covered forever. They don't exist in the home inspection world. They don't exist for most professional liability, certainly not in the home inspection professional liability or E&O world. So again, this is where the retroactive date becomes very, very important, because the policy period has to start or go back to when you started a business, if you will, because the termination of the policy terminates coverage. So you never want to terminate your policy till before you have your next policy in place.
An easy rule of thumb to differentiate those two is, with an occurrence-based policy, that policy will cover an accident that happened during that policy period. And so if somebody comes back 4 years from falling on your sidewalk in front of your house and sues you, the policy that was in place at the time of the occurrence is going to cover it. With professional liability and errors and omissions, claims made means that the policy that is enforced on the day your client tells you they have a claim is the policy that covers the loss. And again, to Kathleen's point, that's again why that retroactive date is so important, because on a claims made policy, it's not the policy that was enforced at the time of the accident, it's the time when you were notified of the claim. And that's why it's critical that it has to be reported during that active policy period.
Another policy terms that we talked a little bit about already is endorsement. So you're going to hear that term frequently. They're add-ons to the policy. They're also called riders. That's the way, additional covers are added to a base policy. The best example in the home inspection world is endorsements for ancillary services. With some carriers, it may increase the premium. Again, another big advantage of Elite is that these services do need to be added as endorsements, but generally the endorsement is not going to cost you additional premium. But do make sure that you do have an endorsement for all the services that you're offering. So this is kind of just going the same information with Elite MGA. All the verified ancillary services are covered and included, generally at no additional charge. So it really behooves you to make sure you know what the coverage is, you know what you're signing up for, you know what your endorsements are. And I'm kind of going to jump ahead a little bit to the level of service Elite MGA offers, because you'll always have the ability to pick up the phone and talk to a live person. Again, the application is going to be done online. You'll have questions on it. You'll be able to exchange with somebody back and forth on email and pick up a call. And you really want to make sure that you have that relationship with your insurance provider, that you can pick up the phone and call. Most really don't offer that level of service. It's really kind of lost and getting, I would say, even more lost as there's more online portals. But when it comes to something as important as errors and omissions insurance, you really need that personal touch to make sure you're properly covered. All right, hand in hand with the claims made or occurrence policy is an insurance term known as a TAIL or ERP, Extended Reporting Period Policy. So because insurance policies for inspectors, professional liability or E&O is claims made when you get out of the business or you stop doing inspections and you no longer need to carry errors and omissions insurance, you still want some protection from the inspections you did before you got out of the business, because you can still get sued after a while, right? It takes a while for, if you're going to get a claim, it's not going to happen the day you did the inspection. Generally, it's going to take a little while, to manifest. So you can buy something called a tail, or an extended reporting period policy. And that basically says, okay, for the next 3 years. Now, when we were back in my previous life, we required a 3-year tail with the assumption that, you'd have no risk after you had a business for 3 years. But it would extend your coverage, even though you're out of the business, even though you didn't have a current policy. It basically is a policy that protects you for all the inspections you did, for the next that may come in, or any claims that may come in on the inspections you did prior, for a period of 3 years, etc. I think this is frankly amazing. This is another big advantage of Elite, and that they offer a free 5-year tail insurance. So when you're getting out of the business, and there are some limitations to that, and how you're getting out of the business, whether you're selling the business, etc. But for the most part, you can get a 5-year tail that's included in your policy at no additional cost. And that, again, is a huge environment. Obviously, if you're in the process of getting out of the business, I know, just to give you some perspective, a 3-year tail generally runs about 175% of the current year premium of a policy. So it's not an inexpensive endeavor. So this 5-year tail option, if you qualify, if you're in the process of getting out of business, not that we're encouraging you to get out of the business, but it's a really big advantage. I think it's just another way that shows that Elite is really there, to help, to be the best partner in your business, to really help you be successful, help you be, protected, even as you're looking to exit the business. No fault reporting. Again, we talked about this. I really can't emphasize how important this is. For many, many years, we negotiated this really, really hard, a very similar feature on which most insurance companies, were very hard pressed to allow us to do. So when I came to Elite and found out that they had this built in, it really was amazing to me. And you can't really underscore how important this is, because this is the ultimate protection. I call it sleep insurance. You have that client that gives, they're a headache, they're not happy. You feel like it's going to go away. It might not. Well, you know what? Let me deal with it. Let me help you. Let me get it out. Let me get rid of it. Let me deal with it the way I know how. But if it does get escalated, I can sleep at night knowing that Elite is there to help me. And I don't even have to do it on my own. As Joe said, they'll help navigate that claim. The fact that they'll go and get get a release signed is really big. And I don't really I'm not covering that today, but, a release is when somebody says you're settling a claim and they sign a release saying they really can't come back at you again. So that's very important. And, again, part of the service that Elite offers is quite amazing, but really important to helping. And then this kind of goes into the same level as that pre-claims assistance. So this is where Joe and his team really, really, pay big dividends, having that experience, being able to minimize your exposure and help you really nip those problems in the bud. Obviously, it's a win-win solution. If we can help you, minimize your exposure, we're minimizing our exposure. But again, the ability to pick up the phone and talk to somebody when you get that claim or when you get that upset customer, can't be minimized, is really a huge advantage.
Yeah, that we in terms of the pre-claim assistance, that goes, like Kathleen said, with when we're doing the responses on your behalf. Like I said, if we don't have to write a check, I mean, that's really the bottom rule, then there's no actual claim to go on your policy. But we like to help with that whole process, especially with the releases, as Kathleen mentioned. The language that has to be in them to fully insulate you from future claims from that client. The language is changed from state to state. And so we want to make sure that you have the right document for the state you're in as part of that service. And so that's why we try to make sure that we're involved from the jump.
Thanks, Joe. And that goes, a little bit further on claims handling. This is hands down, one of a kind, is the fact that Elite is a captive carrier. So Elite MGA is their own provider. And what that means is not only do you have Joe and his team, super experienced, understands, the regulation of home inspections, understands and writes the agreements with home inspections, understand the limitations and the standards of practice, all really critical in minimizing exposure for inspectors. But in addition, because they are their own provider, Elite MGA, they can make all claims decisions. What that means is, and I've been in this situation where, the insurance company, you file a claim, you've got an attorney, maybe they're fighting on your behalf quite well. There's an option to settle it, and the insurance company, who is very distant from you, you don't know them, it's very impersonal, does not allow you to settle. Or settles a big number, which is a good, claim against you. That's not the case with Elite. They are able to make every claim decision. That is so monumentally important when you find yourself in that situation. And Elite is absolutely unique in this, because they're their own captive. So it's really hard to kind of, really emphasize what an advantage that is. But knowing that they can make that decision, Joe and his team can make that decision on every claim locally and on your behalf, is very, very vital.
If you're the example I like to give is you're not going to get Mr. Hartford or Mrs. Hanover or anybody at Next or anywhere else on the phone. And I'm one of the owners of this I have real skin in this game. And that's why we had to have control of the claims. And so we work hand in hand with our inspectors. We're not a company that insures people driving their cars and their boats and their motorcycles and their house. And we don't do that. We just insure home inspectors. And so we have to be cognizant of your needs. And we also want to make sure that we're working with you on these claims. We don't want your reputation damaged. And we don't, by the same token, the lawyers we hire to represent you in every state are people vetted directly by me. There's nobody else in the country that's done home inspection litigation for as long as I have. And I vet each one of these attorneys myself. And the reason I do that is because I want them to be your partner too. We're paying them to protect you. And they have to understand home inspection. They have to understand the exclusions mostly, because that's where a lot of these claims come up, and the laws of your state that might affect this case. And we make sure that we work hand in hand with you to deal with it. And the other thing that makes us unique is, even if I wanted to just go settle a claim without talking to you about it, we wrote our policy so we can't do that. And what that means is that we can't settle any claim without your written consent, or verbal, but your consent. And so nobody at our company can go settle a claim where you come back and say, wow, now I have a loss run with a $50,000 claim on there. These people were nuts. There was no claim there, but the carrier rolled over because the cost of defending me would have been so much that they just paid the claim. Or the lawyer they hired for me didn't understand what this was or what we do. And that can't happen with us. And I'm the guy who gets to make those decisions. There's nobody above me at the company that's going to be able to make that decision. It's mine. And so when you're dealing with us, you're dealing with the people who are making the decisions, not people who have to pick up the phone to get the people who really make the decisions.
I just threw this in here because this question comes up. Do we carry or can you get general liability? Absolutely. General liability is, generally the policies that we write are general liability and general liability generally pays for injuries or damage to the home at the time of the inspection. So you put your foot through the ceiling during a home inspection, that's where general liability insurance would cover the claim. Of course, then is for alleged errors or omissions in the performance of the inspection. So we do obviously, offer both. Not everybody does, but you can get both your GL, it's called GL, and E&O through Elite. All right, we're winding down here. Do we offer commercial inspection coverage? We do. Not only do we offer it, but there's some advantages, again, to working with Elite. There is base coverage included in your policy, but there's also some flexible or some options. For example, we're flexible on square feet. So some professional liability insurance carriers for home inspectors have limits in terms of how large of a building you can inspect for a commercial property, and have other restrictions and limitations on the kind of buildings that you can inspect. We have some, obviously, but less so than most. So we offer a very, very competitive and solid coverage for inspectors that are doing commercial inspections. So it's definitely something that we'd want to talk to you about, is what kind of commercial inspections you're doing, what that looks like, make sure you've got the proper coverage. But it is another big advantage to working with Elite, the flexible options for commercial inspection coverage.
And one thing too I wanted to mention in terms of the claims and risk side of that, and the different coverages and services, is our insureds also get free our entire database of inspection agreements. I've written home inspection agreements for every state in the country based on that state's particular regulations. We provide them to all of our insureds for free. In addition, we have agreements for any ancillary services you may offer. And it's important that you have agreements for those, because the standards are different than your home inspection. And so your home inspection defenses might not help you on the WDI claim. So we have contracts for every single service you might do, and we give those to our insureds free of charge. And if you have something unique that comes up that you need assistance with an agreement for, we'll draft one for you. I'm not the only lawyer on the team. And so we like to make sure we're involved in that part of it as well. In addition, a lot of our insureds will lean on us to take a look at a report from time to time, just to talk about where they might shore up some language or things like that. And we often do these webinars for our insureds, where I do more of a report writing format, for example, to try to avoid claims. And that's why it's critical that we're doing this partnership. We don't do this with other software companies. We're doing this because of HomeGauge, because of how good that tool is in protecting you and helping your clients really understand the product they're getting. And so it makes it easier for us to be able to give deeper discounts when we know our inspectors are out there using a product like HomeGauge.
So as I said, we're winding down here. I do like to emphasize the service level. I mentioned this earlier, but getting a live person on the phone when you have a coverage question or you're dealing with a claim. Yes, Elite offers a very high level of service, very responsive. You're going to be very pleased. It's, again, there's an online application, but everything else is, again, which is streamlined and makes it easy, but you always have somebody available by email and phone when you have coverage questions or claim issues. Again, you're going to be very pleased. So I want to leave on this note. I want to give you kind of what I think is the one of the most important risk management tools that an inspector can have, and that is your pre-inspection agreement. But it's only good for you, or it's only going to really benefit you if it is signed, and generally signed before the start of the inspection. So your insurance coverage, and this is really for all carriers, is contingent on you having that pre-inspection agreement signed, because that agreement has the customer sign off on the fact that they understand the scope of the services, including the limitations of the services. So when it comes to your pre-inspection agreement, there is no flexibility in terms of getting it signed. You have to get it signed 100% of the time, or frankly, you don't do the inspection. That's the most important risk management tool you have. Joe, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think you said it very well, Kath. Trust me when I tell you, the reason they're so important is because most people in the country and in Canada, they're not going to do this more than once or maybe twice in their lifetime. And it might be really spaced apart, in terms of having a home inspection and buying a house. And it's critical that we get to them at the beginning to make sure everybody's on the same page as to the scope of work. And I say that because, I see every single claim that comes in every state in the country for our thousands of insureds. And a lot of these things arise because the client misunderstands the service. I get calls all the time. Well, my inspector didn't tell me, that I had rats. Well, your inspector didn't agree to inspect for that, or my inspector didn't tell me there was a mold stain under the kitchen sink. Well, they didn't offer to provide that service. And so it's critical that the agreements are there and signed by the client beforehand. In my litigation life, all the time, the claimants would try to argue that, well, I shouldn't be bound by that contract with its limitation of liability because they handed it to me after they did the work and said I couldn't have the report. And so I just signed it and I didn't read it. And that's why it's critical that you get them signed before the start of the inspection. and in some states it's mandated, Maryland, New Jersey, and several others. If you're in those states, it has to be signed before you start the inspection from a regulatory standpoint anyway. But it's critical that we let them know. And that's why we focus so much on those agreements, because it's not only how well they protect you, but how well do they explain what you do to that client? Because that's really what we are. I mean, as a lawyer, I'm in the same boat. We're professional communicators, is what we really are. I advocate for my clients or my insureds. You communicate all these things you saw through and filter it through your experience, and it ends up in that report. And part of communication is telling somebody what you're agreeing to do for them in the simplest and easiest way possible. The other thing I'll tell you is judges will look for any way whatsoever to get people out of these agreements every time. They're the consumer. The court's always going to look at them much more fondly than they're going to look at you, and certainly me as a lawyer or as an insurance carrier. But we want to make sure that it's so crystal clear that even the most liberal judge would say, you know what, I'm going to enforce this here. These people clearly knew what they were signing. And so that's why we spend so much time on them, because they are so critically important in keeping you out of claims.
All right. Well, that's it. We wrapping up there on a lot of information we covered. Let me see if I can unmute some. Let's see, mute all. No. If anybody has any questions, we are happy to.
Frank.
I have a couple questions.
All right, great.
So the 25% off, if you already paid for the year, does that just get reimbursed, or?
No, if you already have a policy for Elite, it won't be applied until the next policy. So they can't
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll just save that, like?
They'll apply.
Yeah, at your renewal, the discount would be applied to your renewal premium. Yeah.
And then Joe, I don't know if you probably remember me. I had a small claim for a mold thing in an attic. How do I know if that counted as the no claim, or if it counted as against me?
Let me ask you this. I can look, but did you get asked to pay a deductible?
No.
Then it wasn't a claim.
Okay.
So it won't be on your loss run. Yeah, anything, Marianne, I do remember that. Anything we do for you like that, where it goes away without us writing a check or you having to pay up your deductible to us, it doesn't show up as a claim. So if you ask for your loss run, it wouldn't be there.
Okay. And then the last question is, I do bulkheads now, and I called up and I let them know, but I changed my pre-inspection agreement to try to fit to that. But can I send that to you and make sure
please.
that it's okay?
Absolutely, because I have one. Actually, I'm not sure. Let me look at yours, because I also want to make sure. I actually recently wrote one for bulkhead.
Oh, perfect.
And so maybe it might match what you're doing better than what you have. So definitely send it to me.
Perfect.
It's I can never figure out the chat on these things, but my email address is claims with an S at icmtpa.com. And so any of our insureds, and if any of our insureds are on the call, the same goes to you. If you ever want your agreement looked at or you need help with one of those, you email us and we take care of that for you. But yeah, send it over, Marianne.
Okay. And the only other question I have, when I'm making comments, when you're trying to CYA cover yourself, is there any spot that you could recommend? I mean, I went to the classes and I always try to pick up good comments, or a book, or anything that you yourself would recommend for us to cover ourselves.
There is one, and I can't recall it off the top of my head, but I will, after the seminar, locate it. And there's at least one set that I've looked at that I thought was really comprehensive. And it's relatively simple stuff to use. And in addition to that too, we'll from time to time, if our insureds need, we'll help craft some we call them boilerplate in the law, but some boilerplate language.
I mean, even like the grading of the land away from the house, if it's something standard that we could just put into every one of them, So we're
There's a
covered by
couple.
it.
I know I can find at least 1 or 2 resources for you to look
Okay.
at and see if that fits what you're doing. I know there's at least one very good one. The other one I haven't looked at in a while, but I'll take a look at. If you don't mind reminding me in the email when you send me the agreement, Marianne, I'll take
Thank
a look
you
at that.
so much.
Oh,
All
no
right,
problem.
this was
Happy
useful.
to.
Thanks a lot.
Yep.
And I thought that Frank, did you have a question? I thought that you,
Yes. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm not used to this. Okay. So I don't know if anybody else wants to go first. So I don't want to take up time for things that may not pertain to anybody else, but ours is really kind of specific. So I've been in business for between 12 and 15 years. Last year we did 900 inspections. We love what we do. It's a small family company. My son and I, it used to be 2 sons. Now it's just 1 son. So we're a niche inspection company. We are way different than anybody else. So I do have an E&O policy, liability policy, and workers' comp combination policy with, I believe, probably your biggest competitor. And you probably don't want me to use their name. Okay. So,
I don't care.
I
okay.
mean, I want you to tell us who it is.
Okay.
I have no qualms. Yeah, that's fine.
So this is my problem. So, and we're a member of INTERNACHI, ASHI, and we're very involved in FABI, which is the Florida Association of Building Inspectors. In fact, my son is on the board there.
Mhm.
And so, so we went with this Inspector Pro, but they know that we're different than everybody else. So look at, we only do one thing and we do it great. We do 1 year or 11th month warranty inspections. It's all we do. There's no realtors. There's no nervous buyers. There's no sellers that are trying to hide stuff, and there's no lawyers. Hallelujah. So the homeowner hires us. We do a 1 year warranty inspection. We send the report to both the homeowner and the builder, and they fix everything for free, and we're a hero. Okay. Our E&O liability is way less than a typical home inspector. So when I talked to the head of Inspector Pro, this had to be like 12 years ago. He said, honestly, he said, Frank, I wouldn't even write you policy because we don't even know if we pay a claim because you're so different than everybody else. So fast forward 12 years later, warranty inspections are now more well known. We're one of the first pioneer companies that ever did this. So now in fact, my son Eric and I teach warranty inspections at FABI and all over the state. So we're on the tip of the spear here.
Florida.
So yes, sir. Yep. So so now my problem is this. We wrote with Inspector Pro, and I forgot the gentleman's name. You would know them. Okay. I don't have to use names, but he's looking at my pre-inspection agreement, which I think is great and bulletproof. And all of a sudden he drops the bomb. Frank, you don't really do a home inspection. And I said, my God, yes, we do. Look at a normal home inspection only looks for mechanical, structural, and safety issues. We go a lot deeper because we're looking at all the cosmetic issues also that we know the builder would fix, but we are looking for mechanical, structural, and safety. We are doing a full home inspection, even more complete than most people do. Well, he doesn't like my warrant. He doesn't like my pre-inspection agreement because it has the word home inspector in it. And he kind of got insulting and said, I don't even think you need to be licensed for what you do, which really frosted my cookies. So anyway, I'm looking to.
I'm stealing that, by the way, the cookie.
I mean, I was just taking notes, frosted my cookies.
I usually work much more blue. I'm kind of holding back for you folks since you're just getting to know me, but I am going to use frosted my cookies. Maybe
Okay.
today.
I mean, I'm probably going to do it too, and I'll give you credit, Frank.
Yeah, I got to put that one in the. Yeah.
So I did call somebody from your company probably 3 or 4 months ago. They hooked me up with a lady who specialized in Florida. And if I remember right, she had kind of a unique name. And
Nicole Barnes?
you know what? I'm 66. I don't remember anything anymore.
I hear you.
But anyway,
you're doing inspections. You don't remember anything?
Try not to rip it. How do you get that off?
she was she wanted a copy of my reports. I think I sent her a couple of copies. She wanted me to fill out something, and somewhere along the line,
Well, this has to clip on or off, doesn't it?
That's what's through my ear.
So anyway, we kind of dropped the ball. I haven't reconnected with her, but then I saw this thing on HomeGauge, and I've owned HomeGauge for over like 15 years. So I have thousands and thousands of reports under our belts. My son's great. We've never
That's true. It just has a slit.
How does it open?
I don't. That's what I'm asking you.
Tony, can you put your
Hey,
mute on?
Tony. Oh, yeah. Tony,
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
thank you. Thanks.
So anyway, I like to do business with you guys and drop this other company probably because I need to have, because if he doesn't like my pre-inspection agreement, I don't think they could aggressively work in my interest if we already had this disconnect. And
Yeah, no, I get your point. And so, again, the beauty of us is, you're talking to you're talking to the people who get to make these decisions. So what I would say, Frank, I'd like to take a look at it myself, not to critique it, but so I can better understand exactly your process, right? Because I want to make sure we can do the best for you. You're correct that the warranty inspections are a much lower claim frequency and a much lower risk for many reasons, not the least of which is somebody's now been in that house for a while and is talking to you. It's not a seller that's saying, I'm not telling you a damn thing.
right.
And so I think from that standpoint, it's just a much better, and again, the relationship between the builder and the buyer is a lot different than buyer and seller of just the average, what I call any other house that's not brand new is a used car, right? And so to me, it's a much more unique process, but that's kind of what we specialize in, is being unique. And so, yeah, I'm sure it is. Like, for example, we started building a whole coverage for folks that only do 203K. We rate people. I have people who don't do any home inspections. That's all they do is the 203K. So when we set their premium, that is what we're considering. We're not saying, hey, we're going to compare this person to the 30,000 home inspectors in the country and that risk. We're going to narrow this price to tailor this limited risk. And so that's what we specialize in. So if you don't mind sending me an email to the claims address and send me a copy of the agreement too, because it'll help me keep my mind fresh on what we discussed. Okay. And let me take a look at it and circle back to you on what we could do.
And so
let's
that
see
was
if we can get you out of there.
That was claims at, and then there was a bunch of letters.
Yeah, it's ICMTPA.com. And that'll come right to my desk.
Great. And I won't hold you up anymore. It's just the frustrating thing is we're seeing 11th month warranty inspections be a really big thing, and more inspectors are doing it. And yeah. I tried to tell this guy that, this is the future of home inspecting, and we're teaching it all over the state, and more inspectors are doing it. So whether you like it or not, or me or not, or whatever, you need to adapt and not treat me like a pariah. So,
no, okay. I don't disagree with you. I think that they're all valid points you have too about how your coverage really has to work for you. If otherwise, what's the point?
Great.
Right.
Okay. Well, I will definitely do that. And thank you all so much for your time and a good seminar.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. And I just realized it's already after 5 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it's 5 o'clock here.
Yeah, I don't know if there are any other questions while everyone's online. Otherwise, we can wrap it up and let everyone get to their weekend.
I've got just a quick one. I'm just wondering about the how do you put this into words? Just like a general consensus of like how many claims, or the risk and liability. Is it really common for a home inspector to get sued? And if so, is it the type of thing where you get sued like right away after the inspection, or is it how frequently do inspectors get sued? A year or 2, 3 down the line?
It depends, right? Because most times what precipitates the filing of the lawsuit is a long drawn out process where they are making a claim, for example, and we're investigating it as the carrier. But generally speaking, most lawsuits related to home inspections come in within about 2 years of the inspection. I've had some outliers, but for the most part, most of them come in around then. And most claims come in within a year of the inspection. The ones that come up quickly usually are roof-related claims, roof leaks, because that's something that somebody might discover right away when they move in the house. And pests, we get a lot of claims related to squirrels and mice and all that stuff. And sometimes the drainage complaints don't really show up until you get to the next growing cycle, where you start to get a lot of rain and things, and you can really see where the puddles are forming. So a lot of it's based on weather and where you are in the country too. To give you an example, with home inspection, New Jersey is far and away the most litigious state for home inspectors in the country, bar none. The average cost for us to defend a claim in New Jersey is upwards of $35,000 to $40,000, and that's just to pay the lawyers.
Wow.
And they have 4 years in New Jersey to sue you from the day of your inspection, or the day when they discover the problem. And that's why that retroactive date that Kathleen was focusing on, that's why we're focusing on that in this seminar, because whether you do business with us or not, that's a takeaway that's got to be on your mind all the time when you're thinking about your coverage and your risks. Is there's a lot of time back there. If you've been doing this a while, there's a whole lot of time. But yeah, New Jersey's a loss leader. And then, as you can imagine, California is pretty close to that. It's another litigious state. Florida, not so much. We get a lot of claims. I think I get more claims related to 4 points than I do for home inspections in Florida, truthfully. But I get a lot of claims now in Florida because of these homeowners carriers, where you do the inspection and they buy the house, and the carrier comes out 2 weeks later and says, we're not covering you anymore unless you get a new roof. Yeah. And that's a trend that's starting to happen all over the country as well.
I've seen that.
But yeah, New Jersey's the worst, far and away.
Thanks very much for the seminar, guys. It was very informative. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, and thanks, Kathleen and Joe. Like, I learned so much about E&O insurance today that I feel like I need it, and I'm not even a home inspector.
We've got one for you too. Presenter's insurance. We can definitely write it.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you taking your time, and everyone who joined. Thank you guys so much. And certainly feel free to reach out, to us at HomeGauge if you have any questions, or to Elite MGA and Joe and Kathleen. But we'll have a recording of this. I believe we are recording it, and we'll have a recording of this and some information and all of that. So anyway, you know how to find us.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Guys,
have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.